as you know, this week we are doing pandemic makeovers for some Christmas and winter STEM challenges. This is our third day. If you missed the first 2 days, I'll make sure you get a link before we close out today. Today, we're talking about Frozen Fortress. Now, this one took me a little bit of time to figure out because this is one that in a typical year, um, I sort of have to psych myself up for the messiness that this can have in the classroom because it's marshmallows. Now, there are some ways to use marshmallows and still keep it like not so sticky and not so messy. But I was thinking in this year, we need to probably avoid, most likely, we need to avoid marshmallows altogether. So I have some new ideas for some ways that you can work this out and choose some different materials to make it just a little bit simpler. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about before I even get into the material substitutions is just to think about what do we do or what are we trying to do when we create sort of new versions and modifications for STEM challenges in this way for this year. So what I really want you to think about, whether it's this challenge or another one, is sort of like keeping whatever changes you make as close to the essence of the original challenge as you possibly can. So, as I was saying, we don't want to get super messy, but also, even if we do one of the options I'll share with you where you can use marshmallows and it's not quite as messy, if you're doing this with each individual student in your classroom, buying enough marshmallows for everybody to do that can actually get a little bit pricey. They do have marshmallows at Dollar Tree, but just enough for everybody to make sort of a fortress or a wall. So I wanted to give you some options that were cheaper and cleaner. But then thinking about this challenge, what is it that makes it an actual, challenge? And what it's really about when you think about it is the marshmallows are being stacked up, right? So it's about taking multiple small objects that are not perfectly uniform and using them in a way that creates a stable and strong wall. So let me actually move into sharing some material stuff with you, and then we'll get into extensions, criterion constraints lists, some modifications, all that fun stuff. So I'm going to take this out of the picture and put this in. Okay. So for snowballs, you're going to need to have something to symbolize snowballs. As I said, I've used marshmallows a lot, but you could even do crumpled up paper or scrap paper cut into squares. Geometric solids nets you could do. That would take a little bit longer for the kids to actually, cut out a net and fold it up and do that multiple times. So you might not want to go there, but if it's part of your standards, it could fit in pretty well. Or if they're working from home, they could even use ice cubes. You could have them stack up ice cubes. And if it snowed where you are at, you could even have them do this like for real with snow. But I wanted to give you, this is, I think, what I would most likely do is I would have students take a sheet of scratch paper. If they're at home, they can use junk mail if they don't have any, like a notebook piece of paper or a normal piece of paper. And I would have them fold it into, I think, 16 parts. You could even go smaller than that if you wanted to. And what I would do on day one, before we even got into the challenge, I might introduce it. I might introduce the criterion constraints, which I'll show you in just a second. I couldn't decide today if I wanted to do materials first or criterion constraints, but here we are doing materials. But one of the things that I think I would do the day before the challenge is introduce it and then have the students take their single piece of paper like this, fold it up. And you might even give them the choice of like getting it into 16 parts or making even smaller ones if they want to try that out. And then task them each with coming up with at least 2 ways, or you could say 3 ways, to make some sort of building bricks or building blocks or snowballs. And so they might come up with just cutting out one of these individual rectangles and crumpling it into a ball because this looks like snowballs, right? Or they might take it and make a cylinder, or they might take it and fold it into sort of a rectangular prism. They might make triangular prisms. They might come up with some things you can't even imagine right now, right? And that, I think, would be a really good, even like a 5-10 minute thing to do, to have students do that and then come in, share either in whole class Zoom, or they can hold them up, they could talk about them, or you might even have them do this sort of where they record it on Flipgrid. And this is maybe one of the things they can talk about in smaller groups, is to share what did they make. So That way, that gives them some concepts or some ideas for what they could have as their snowballs before you actually get into the part where you give them the STEM challenge. Okay, let me add this back in and talk about some other options. So you do want, as I was saying, okay, so everything on this page I've actually covered. So let me get into the next one. In addition to having something as your building bricks or your building blocks of snowballs, it's helpful to have some kind of connector. So that might be in the form of toothpicks or pipe cleaners, wire, tape or address labels or string, something that's going to help them actually keep things together as they're building. I'm going to show you another couple of examples, some images here and a video too in just a moment. And then narrow stabilizers, and you would want to limit the number. So I think maybe the next one might show the picture. So let me come in and let me show this to you just in case it's not coming up. So in this different example that you see right here, you can sort of see the marshmallows are stacked and they're sort of crammed in between straws that have been secured with pipe cleaners. I think that might be the only connector that was used. I think the straws actually are punched through the foil there, those little foil platters. You don't need to give those foil platters to the kids. They don't need things like that. These are just all nice to have kind of items. But that's what I mean when I say a stabilizer is like the straws, or you could use, do this. Okay. Or you could use cardboard, scraps, straws, pencils, wooden dowels. You just want to make sure that you have some sort of size requirement if you're using this, because what you don't want to have happen is the students to build primarily a cardboard wall, because it sort of defeats the purpose, or it goes against the essence of the challenge, as I was saying earlier. Quick note before I keep going. If you want more modifications on ways students can work collaboratively in a social distance or distance learning environment, I went over that on the first day in the snowman stretch video. I'll share with you a link later where you can go and watch those. But since they were going to be the same pretty much every day, I decided not to cover it every single day. Oh, here's the criterion constraints. This is what I wanted to make sure I go over with you. So for criterion constraints, you can kind of pick and choose and arrange this as you like. But one of the things you want to think about is if you want your kids to have a height or a width or an area requirement. So one of the things you might do to make it simple, because they might not have rulers and all that at home, but even if they don't have a scratch piece of paper, they generally are kind of aware of the size of a piece of paper. They might have a folder. So you can ask them to create a fortress wall that is about the size of a sheet of paper or a folder or something like that. So they have an idea as to, what sort of size area they should be building across. You want to tell them their fortress must defend against a snowball attack. And the fortress must be made mostly of snowballs. So this was a way I was trying to get around them building primarily out of cardboard, which is going to be easier to do than stacking, as I said, the essence of this challenge, stacking objects that are sort of smaller or connecting them in some way when they're not completely uniform and still creating a wall that is strong and sort of impervious to attack, right? Okay, let's see. And then when we're talking about measuring the design success of what they build, well, they're going to have to test, and I'm going to show you this in a video in a second. They're going to have to test their designs against a snowball attack. And so what you can do is have them either estimate or calculate how much of their fortress wall fell after the attack. So a simple way of doing this is just a straight subtraction problem. So however many initial building bricks they had in their design before the attack, they would count those up, and then they would do the attack. And then afterwards, they count how many are left. They do that subtraction problem and they can see what they're left with. You could just have them count what they're left with, depending if they're kind of younger, if they're like really young students, or if they're older, you might just have them calculate the percentage or find the fraction of the wall that survived the snowball attack. This is an example of what the first image I showed you, what it looks like behind it. So you can kind of see this one. We did pierce the marshmallows with toothpicks. One of the things I mentioned earlier is I was going to tell you there are ways to keep it cleaner or less messy with marshmallows if you decide to use them. And what you can do is just say the marshmallows can't be pierced. And that keeps them from, getting to the really sticky part of it, and it keeps things pretty clean. If you do choose to use marshmallows in your classroom, I always recommend having them work on some sort of a work mat, like put down butcher paper or craft paper, or have them work outside to keep that from getting like desk sticky and gross. honestly, I would just avoid it altogether this year and use paper to create snowballs. That's what I would do. There's just absolutely no shadow of a doubt in my mind. But you can see the only other thing that's really used here is pipe cleaners and craft sticks. I think there might be a rubber band in there somewhere, and it's built on top of foil. Another thing you can do is have an option for them to build a snowball launcher or a catapult rather than having them actually throw the snowballs when they're doing the tests. If you have kept track of my Halloween STEM challenges, there's one in there called Treat Toss. So if you have that, you can actually just do 2 STEM challenges at once, or you can just run your own sort of catapult challenge. You might even not even call it a catapult and just say a snowball launcher, because they might end up doing some different kinds of designs. They might end up with sort of a slingshot design. Always remind your kids, if they're working at home, they need permission from their parents to use whatever materials they've decided they have and that they can use, and to do the testing to make sure that they are safe and you are safe and the parents are happy, the kids are happy. And then another thing you can add in, if you want to sort of make it a little bit more challenging, is have them, if you have older students, maybe ask them to include a working functional drawbridge or some kind of fortress entrance. This is my reminder that I wanted to show you a little video of what the snowball attack might look like. I need to share a different screen. I always forget when I'm doing this, when I change the, here it is. Okay, so I'm going to play 90 seconds from this video, and then we'll talk about it. Oops, got to go over here and press play. You have students create offensive tools in order to conduct the snowball attack. You do want to be very thoughtful about where you are having them set up and where students are allowed to stand. In this case, this is a modified slingshot, and you don't want students standing where they might get hit with a snowball from a slingshot. So I'm going to stand a little bit off camera and attack this fortress wall, and we'll see how we do. A couple of things I just realized I forgot to mention about the snowball attack is whether or not you're going to just give each team, let's say, 10 seconds or 20 seconds, and they're all attacking at the same time, or if you're going to give students a set number of throws or tries. So what you might do is each person on a team gets 3 opportunities to attack. You probably noticed that it was a lot more effective to hit the wall with bigger marshmallows. But depending on the tool that the students create, if they are doing an offensive tool rather than throwing, it could go either way. So I would allow the teams to choose. So with that, you have all the basics. Okay. So one quick thing before I move off of this screen, one thing is there was music playing in that part of the video, and I want to make sure it was this one, Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies by Kevin MacLeod. So I always want to make sure that I am compliant with making sure people get credited. So that was that song that was in there. And then earlier I had said, if you've missed any of the earlier videos from this week and you wanted to see them, if you go to Feel Good Teaching on YouTube, find the Christmas and Winter playlist, and you'll see down here as you scroll down, I already did Snowman Stretch, and then I did Sled and Slope as well. Okay, let me remove that. Let me see if there's something else here. Let's talk about extensions really quickly. Wrong screen, Carrie. So for extensions, maybe I'll just tell you them. I don't think you need that. I don't think I have any more pictures I need you to see on this one anyway. One of the things you can do is write your own word problems. There are a lot of really good word problems in here. If you think about, depending on how they built their fortresses, you know, they might be able to track data from like one column of the fortress wall versus other columns. You can sort of prompt them by giving them an example of what kinds of, like, maybe it's a multi-step problem. Maybe we're working on straight subtraction right now. Maybe we're working on finding a fraction and converting it to a decimal or percent. Have them do their own problems and then trade and solve with maybe either just a few partners on their smaller team or whole class. They can maybe put something up on a shared Google slide. If you happen to be solving or studying medieval architecture, this could be a nice feed into that. The science or engineering of igloos could be very cool. Polar animal adaptations or other animal adaptations as well. Synonyms for cold, and then have them use that in some sort of writing piece, a poem or a song or a story, or even just like a descriptive or imaginative writing piece about the snowball attack. And I would say one other thing that I do want to say about the snowball attack is whatever it is that you're using for building your primary building blocks. So if it's paper and you're using these to be, sort of your stand-ins for marshmallows for building that sort of frozen fortress, whatever that's made of, that's what your snowball attack material should be made of as well. And it should be roughly like a similar size material. So usually in the marshmallow one, I'll give them the option of small marshmallows or big marshmallows because sometimes they would build a catapult or a slingshot. And so sometimes the smaller one, it might actually be helpful depending on what they've built. But always we're talking about the same sort of kind of size of materials. So if we did this initial setup, like I said earlier, where we're taking the paper and dividing it into sections, then one of these sections would be used to make the snowball for attack. Now, because these are lighter and smaller materials, and they're not going to have as much power behind them, I might usually have kids stand like 10 feet back as they're sort of attacking their own fortress wall. In this case, you might need to do some trial and error, but these aren't going to travel as far. Like I threw that pretty hard and I might have gotten it 5 feet. So they're probably going to need to be a whole lot closer in order for this to even hit their fortress wall. And just like I said in the other video that was pre-recorded, you want to have sort of in mind, how do you define what you mean by attack? So if it's that they take another sheet of paper like this and make 16 snowballs, and they're going to throw 16 snowballs at their fortress wall, and then that's it. That's an easy way to do it, right? Or you can, I think probably I would do it that way, because if they're at home, trying to do like a timed attack would be a little bit harder. So I think if they were at home and you have like a hybrid situation, I would just say, you can throw the snowball. You don't have to make like 20 snowballs. You can just make one, but throw it 10 times or 20 times, right? And maybe have a requirement that the throws actually have to hit the wall. Like it doesn't count as a throw if it never makes contact with it, because, some of our aim is a little bit bad. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all of the main things on this particular challenge. It's probably not the first one I would choose to do. As I mentioned, I'm kind of going in order of what I think is most manageable and easiest to do. Will say this is usually one of the students' favorite STEM challenges for winter and Christmas. So if you can do it, it would be good. But I do think Snowman Stretch is a lot simpler and still very meaty as a challenge. And Sled and Slope that we talked about yesterday, also an excellent choice. As a reminder for you, as I mentioned in the previous days, we do have, there is a thing going on this week that's a Grateful for Teachers sort of collaborative effort with some friends. Today and tomorrow are half off hybrid resources days, and the Snowman Stretch is one of those things that I have there. And I'm one of 13 people. We each put 2 things in, so there are 26 resources that are for both printable and paperless, so you can use them in both ways. Plus, there's a lot of gift card giveaways that are happening on Friday that you can sign up for. You just go to that bit.ly link, Grateful for Teachers. It's all lowercase. It is case sensitive, so you got to make sure that you type it in all in lowercase letters. And then you can check out everything that's available. The half off hybrid is Wednesday and Thursday. And then Friday, we're doing the drawing. So make sure that you register for that drawing. It's like all the way at the end of the page when you go to Grateful for Teachers. All the way at the end, there are multiple different ways you can enter the drawing. And you can kind of see what all the prizes are, because there's like gift cards and there's like book packages and there's resources and there's a lot of fun stuff. If you have any questions about this challenge or any other challenges, you can always let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you back here tomorrow, and we're actually going to do reindeer relay, which is one of I call it a Christmas challenge because it was initially made that way, but there is a way to do it where it's just winter if you're not allowed to do Christmas stuff. And even though it has relay right in the title, I have some really fun ideas for how you can get around relay races, because obviously that's not going to work with social distancing right now, but we can still do a lot of like super fun stuff, even if you've got kids at home and you've got kids in the classroom. So hope you're having a great week and a good night, and take some time to relax. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye for now.